Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
Welcome back. Where have they been?
Where have they been?
Where have they been?
I don't know. Probably working.
Telling three friends. That's where they've been.
That's where I've been. Except I've been telling them from 6 feet away. Hey!
Hey!
I was going to mimic putting my hand in front of my face, and then I realized we're a podcast and nobody sees my face.
No one will see it except for me.
Welcome back to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. This is episode 33. Yeah, wow. We're definitely over the halfway mark, which is great. What have you recently been playing?
Well, Seth, recently I've been playing one of the many games in the long line of Tom Clancy Rainbow Six games. I've been playing specifically 2015's Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, which if that was its full name,
yeah.
like 2015's Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, that would be a very long name.
Yeah, Tom Clancy has a lot of video games.
Tom Clancy does have a lot of video games and a lot of books. For those who don't know, the original Rainbow Six came out in 1998, and I think it's based on the Rainbow Six novel, which also came out in 1998. I don't know if they were like one was worked on cotangent with the other, like what they did with Starship Titanic, where like a book was being written at the same time as the game was being developed. In any case, it originally came out in 1998. It was a tactical first-person shooter, and Rainbow Six Siege is the most recent iteration of this franchise, where it's still an online tactical shooter, though you're playing with a group of people taking down terrorists or pretty much terrorists. So as it's a tactical shooter, it's not kind of your traditional, run and gun shooter in the sense that you're running through buildings like blowing people up like in like Call of Duty or something. You're taking your time and trying to get through the building in a way to avoid, as many casualties on your team while also eliminating a terrorism unit. Sometimes you have to defuse bombs. Sometimes you just have to wipe out the enemy team. But yeah, I've been playing that with my friends. All of my friends are very new at the game except for one of us. But so we are mostly playing through the starter missions where you're primarily going against AI as opposed to playing against other people. But we've been having a good time.
Yeah, I owned it for a period of time, where I played Siege, and I got yelled at by the internet.
Yeah,
and then I stopped owning the game. It's a fun game if you're into that kind of tactical first-person shooter type game, and you can get shot through like doors. I just remember I was in like a one room, and we were trying to seal it against the people coming in, and we had to shut all the doors, and I was just like making sure all the doors were shut, and then I was shot through drywall or something.
Yeah, I mean the best thing that happened while I was playing, and I'm gonna put him on blast here. Our artist was playing on my side. I went into a room and I cleared it, and he heard gunfires, so he followed in, and he turned the corner and shot me in the head, thinking I was a terrorist. After I had cleared the room and there were no terrorists.
Yep. Well, maybe you were a terrorist.
I don't know, it was great because it happened right at the beginning of the game, so then I had to sit out through part of the game.
Yeah, because there's no respawn.
There's no respawn, no. Yeah, so
yeah, you're just dead.
Once you're dead, you just kind of watch. Though there's kind of a cool gameplay mechanic where if you leave, there are drones that you can drive around. They're little, they look like little, what are they called? Hoverboard style, like the 2-wheel driving things. Little drones like that, and you can go under doors and such. But if you hide one and people don't find it, when you die, you can actually toggle into that drone's camera. You can't move it around, but you can look around through that drone's camera, and that allows you to you can still talk to your team members and kind of communicate if people are like rounding a corner, if you see people, or if your drone is close to the bomb, if you see anyone in that area. So that's a nice little mechanic that they added. It kind of gives the person who dies something to do, which, that's not always a thing in video games.
Yeah, especially if you're bad at games, you're going to be spending a lot of time in that death screen.
Yeah, exactly. But what about you, Seth? What have you been playing recently?
So I've actually recently been playing a game that I talked about on my Buy Weight Pass segment Command and Conquer Remastered.
Oh, cool.
So it's done by Petroglyph, who's the same developers as like 8-Bit Hordes and 8-Bit Commandos or something. 8-Bit Armies.
Yep.
8-Bit Armies. 8-Bit Armies and 8-Bit Hordes. Command and Conquer came out this year. So they took Command and Conquer and Red Alert and brought it to the modern age. They updated the FMVs.
Oh, cool.
Which are the full motion videos between the missions. They upgraded the artwork in the game, and they actually brought in a lot of different like audio. If you like Command and Conquer, buy this remastered. It was faithfully done, and it's a really, really, really a great remaster of Command and Conquer. It just bringing Command and Conquer to the modern age. You can play all those original levels and be able to. The funny thing is that there's this one particular sprite drawing that actually people didn't know what it was for the longest time, and they thought it was like a crashed alien ship in a map, and people just didn't know what it looked like because it was the graphics were the time that Command and Conquer originally came out with,
right.
So they weren't clear. So when they made it HD, people were excited to finally find out what it was, whether it was a crashed alien ship or something, and it was a crashed helicopter. So, but yeah, and I was actually reading about somebody who was playing the game and was very happy that there's a bug in a specific level. There's a glitch where you can actually get a level to be unbeatable if a certain sequence of events happens and you have to restart the level. So the guy playing the game in 2020 had issues with it, and he researched it and found somebody talking about the glitch from the original time that the game came out.
Oh, fun.
In the 90s. So he's like 30 years have passed between two people getting stuck at the same spot in the game. And he's like, that's a faithful remaster, right?
Yeah,
you have these two people in two different states in their lives, right? Playing the same game, getting stuck in the same exact spot to go onto the internet to complain about it.
That's awesome.
And it's just, it's cool. So yeah, if you like Command and Conquer, I definitely recommend the remaster. It really helps pull things. It just helps bring life back into the series.
Now, I know it's not part of because the remaster is just the first two games, right? It's Tiberian Dawn and Red Alert.
Tiberian Sun.
Sun, yeah.
Yeah, Red Alert. It's the original Command and Conquer with the expansion, and then the Red Alert with the expansion.
Yeah.
And that's it. So those two games with their expansion packs. I don't know if they're going to be remastering more of the Command & Conquer. I mean, some of the Command & Conquer has come out recently. So, like Generals came out in the 2000s era. So I don't know if everything needs to be remastered. It's still a pretty... I'm not going to say it's like an active franchise, but it's still a franchise that I think EA has the publishing rights to, and they can just roll out more games for it. So I'm guessing they're going to wait to see how the remaster does, and maybe they'll do some newer game coming out. I don't know. Whatever Command & Conquer's
I was not as big into Command & Conquer as Seth was, but him talking about it a lot. Who knows? Maybe I'll buy the game. And one thing, though, I do like about it is just a meme I saw of a character from the third Red Alert. It's Tim Curry's character, but okay. It's just him going, "Spice!" I don't know. It's funny.
It is funny. Yeah, they had some great actors. I really enjoyed real-time strategies with the stories. Like, I enjoyed the story of the real-time strategy games. So, like, the original StarCraft story and, like, the Command & Conquer story and the Warcraft story. Like, I like that on top of the gameplay. Like, I was frustrated as a kid because I couldn't beat a map, and I just wanted to know what the rest of the story was.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, our episode for today is not about Command & Conquer. It's also not about Tom Clancy games. But those are two topics that we could definitely revisit because those have extensive history.
They do.
Yeah, our topic is going to be rail shooters.
Specifically, arcade cabinet rail shooters, specifically rail shooters with light guns in arcade
we're
cabinets.
Getting very down to the nitty-gritty in terms of our topic for today.
So, Zach, do you have any memories of any rail shooters?
Yeah, so there was an arcade that was in a movie theater in the town that my family moved here from Massachusetts, or Seth and my family moved up here to Massachusetts. There was a movie theater in our town, and the movie theater had a few rail shooters that I really liked playing. There are 3 in particular, all 3 of which we talk about in this episode. House of the Dead, it was actually House of the Dead 2, Time Crisis 3, and also Gunblade New York. And it had a couple other light gun rail shooters that were a little more modern. I remember it had a Terminator game at one point, around the time Terminator Salvation came out. It had like an Aliens game, but it was way before, this was way before that the last Aliens movie came out. It just had an Aliens game. And it had one of the Cabela, like big buck hunter. I think it was
big buck hunter.
I think it was Big Buck Hunter, yeah, games. But I used to play a lot of Gunblade New York, which we'll talk about later. And I also used to play a lot of Time Crisis with my friends. A lot of times we'd show up to the movie theater maybe an hour or so before the movie, mostly because this was back when you didn't really get to reserve your spots. You kind of had to just show up. So we like to get there early to kind of kill time, and also I like to get there early because I like to play arcade games. So I'd get there early and I'd play usually Time Crisis or Gunblade New York. What about you, Seth?
So I actually, especially before COVID, I actually really like physical medium with my arcade games. So I like when there's like things to hold on to interact with the game, like machine guns or guns, or steering wheels or motorcycles or something like that, something that you can physically touch. I think it makes it, for me, it makes that why you go to an arcade. Like, the reason you go to an arcade for me is to go in and play these games on like ridiculous screens with ridiculous controllers, because you can't get that at your house. You can't get a race car seat that you can sit in at your house. I mean, you could, but not for $1 a game.
Yeah, it's accessible
right? So specifically, I remember Virtual Cop and Time Crisis, and I remember Virtual Cop had the gun that didn't make the noise, and Time Crisis had the gun that made the noise, because Time Crisis's gun would fly back. I remember I have a friend, Dave, who was very good at Time Crisis, and we used to go and we would play Time Crisis at either the movie theater or I think Dave and Buster's when we were in college, and he was always very, very good at the game, and I was not. I'm kind of more of like a blast 'em, like the Danny DeVito meme. That's
blast
how I play video. Yeah, that's how I play video games. I think I've said that before on this podcast. Yeah, so I also really like the House of the Dead. I think it's in an arcade. You can play kind of like a horror game and not be too scared because it's an arcade. So you've got like all this like other inputs coming in from all these other games, lots of noise, lots of sound. I always arcades themselves give me a little bit of I guess like an adrenaline / anxiety rush, because it's a lot of stuff going on at once. And I think that hanging out with some friends, having a beer, and like just playing a shooting game is a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm not really good at them, but I've never professed to be good at games. So that's my memories of rail shooters. Oh, specifically arcade rail shooters. Do you want to give us kind of a little history on the technology that the rail shooters use, the light guns?
Light guns actually are probably one of the oldest staples in arcade history. So they go back years. Some of the earliest light gun games got their start in the 1930s. And those early light gun games were mechanical in nature. And what they did was they utilized sensors that were put in on targets that would recognize when a beam of light would hit the sensor. So very, very rudimentary in terms of design, but innovative. And one of the very first light gun games was a game released in Germany called Seeburg Ray of Light. The gameplay involved the player using the light gun itself, and they would just shoot at targets, specifically the back of a flying duck, which would kind of rise up in the mechanical setting, and when you shot it, it dropped down.
Which would show kind of the origin of the name light gun, since later on they did not emit an actual light. They emitted light, but a light that was not perceivable by human eyes.
Yeah, well, so the way later light guns worked is kind of a slightly different method. So in the 1980s, light guns started to become more popular with the advent of the home video game systems being popular. And some of those early light gun games are games like Duck Hunt and Hogan's Alley. And these games used a different style of light gun. What happened was that there was a sensor within the gun itself, and when the gun was pointed at the screen, it actually triggered one of the button presses of a controller, and that caused the game to flash black for a fraction of a fraction of a second, and the object that you're supposed to be shooting on would be white, and that gun is looking for that white square, and that's all it's doing. And when it sees that the white square is in the eye line, then it allows you to get the point, and it makes the change in the game. In Duck Hunt's case, the duck will drop out of the sky and the dog will pick it up and chuckle. Or in Hogan's Alley's case, you would kill the guy that you're shooting, because Hogan's Alley is you shooting at gangsters. So these were an incredibly popular style of game, and there were light gun games that were on virtually all the consoles at that time. There were some for, Sega, Nintendo, and so on.
And Duck Hunt was the game that made light guns popular.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the home.
Yeah.
Before, light guns were available for home purchase before. And light guns were in the arcades, but they didn't become and they were always popular in the arcade, but they didn't become super popular until the Nintendo Duck Hunt game. And I just think it's cool that we kind of kept the name of it being a light gun, I guess the NES Zapper is called the NES Zapper, but the premise of it being a light gun, even though kind of the whole technology of it emitting actual light is kind of gone.
Yeah, and what's also cool is that the Zapper is kind of the first time we also see a design change in these guns. So in the older days, back with the system like the Magnavox Odyssey, which had a light gun, or some of the old Pong consoles, which had light guns for some of their, side games and stuff they had, the guns looked like guns. Like the Magnavox Odyssey gun is a shotgun. It's a black barreled brown, loader mechanism. It has a brown stock. It looks like a shotgun. And then some of the old Pong machines that had light gun games in them used what looked like revolvers, and they were actually like a heavy plastic or even a light metal. So these things looked like real pistols, but the Nintendo Zapper is like a space gun. It looks cool. The original one was gray and white, and then they changed it to orange and white. But it looked kind of like a ray gun almost, and that's what the kind of the style that light guns took on. And going into the arcades, while the guns would sometimes look realistic, they're always really brightly colored, which really leads us into some of the rail shooters that we talk about going forward.
And I think part of the brightly colored nature was also in later editions of these games to signify whether you're first or second player. So they would signify everything red is first player and everything blue is second player.
Yes,
and they kind of keep that distinction of color throughout other cabinets, so that you can go from cabinet to cabinet and you kind of know, okay, red means I'm first player and I can just pick that up. And primarily first player would be on the right side of the cabinet, and second player would be on the left side.
I think that's the traditional
layout, is red on right and blue on left. So there's that as well, I think. But then I think that's also kind of a training to get people used to it and kind of getting associated with that type of setup. Yeah.
Now, at the same time as these light gun games were popular on the home console, there were also games that were coming out in the arcade and on the home console called rail shooters. And rail shooters were games like Space Harrier, where you were in Space Harrier, you play as a guy who is like flying through. I don't even think you're flying through space. I think you're just flying through the air, and you're shooting at targets, but you're being driven in one direction. You know, you're on a rail essentially. And these two genres then combined, and that combination was Virtua Cop, which was one of the earliest light gun rail shooting games that came out in the arcade.
Yeah, so Virtual Cop, which originally launched on the Sega Model 2 system, which is an arcade cabinet, and eventually was ported to the Sega Saturn and Windows 95 and 97 respectively, was instead of using two-dimensional sprites like a game like Hogan's Alley, the game used real-time polygonal graphics that responded to where the shot was made. So you're playing Virtual Cop and you shoot at the enemy. If you shoot them in the leg, they're going to respond differently than if you shoot them in their head, because they're being real-time graphics. And also because it was a rail shooter, you were essentially moving through a level. So it felt like, because you're holding a gun in your hand, you're moving through the level, and you're in first-person perspective, it felt like you were going through and living this experience almost. I mean, a very rudimentary way, but for the time, it felt pretty cool. In Virtual Cop, there's distinct pistols, as we mentioned. In the first edition, they were both brightly red, and then later editions, they were blue and red. I think also because arcades are in a public space, I think there's some legal ramifications for making sure that guns looked not like guns, because there's going to be a bunch of people standing around you. In Virtual Cop, you play as a police officer. You either play as a Michael Hardy or a James Cools. Michael Hardy, his nickname is Rage, and James Cools, his nickname is Smarty. And the game was structured so you had to go through missions shooting criminals and not shooting civilians, because that's how things should be. You get a 6-bullet pistol, and you would generally have to do the reload animation, so you'd have to shoot the gun off screen, so you weren't pointing at the screen. So then I would get into this motion where you'd shoot, and then you'd twist the wrist and you'd shoot off screen. So shoot, and then you twist the wrist, shoot, twist the wrist, and you get like this twist the wrist motion going. And like after you play the game for like an hour, you're like, I can't do this anymore. So, and the premise of Virtual Cop was that there was an illegal gun running operation being run by a criminal syndicate named EVIL Incorporated.
Wow.
So they were evil enough, so evil that they incorporated themselves for tax purposes.
That's good.
And the cop who figured out that this illegal gun running operation was going on, found out about it and then was murdered. So the police decided to make a task force to kill every criminal.
It happens.
And that's Virtual Cop. So Michael and James have to go forward and kill and take down evil by killing everybody in the way. And evil is led by a man by the name of Joe Fang and his followers Kong, the King, and the Boss.
Wow.
Before departing Virtual Cop, there was some cool things about it. It was one of the first games ever to allow you to shoot through glass, which is kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah, that's very
since
cool.
Glass is easily shot through. And it was one of the first games to use the Sega's graphics library operating system, along with Virtua Fighter 2 was the other game that used it. So if you look at Virtual Cop and you look at Virtua Fighter and you think they look the same, it's because they probably are.
Yeah, I've seen both games in action, and a lot of the like the graphics look almost identical.
They're very blocky.
Yeah, very, very blocky.
I don't think they become unblocky until Virtual Cop 3.
It was almost a like style to have the graphics be blocky too. Like people liked it, so they probably could have made them a little less blocky, but like in 95, but like no.
So Virtual Cop does have two sequels, Virtual Cop 2 in 95 and Virtual Cop 3 in 2003. The premises are very similar to Virtual Cop 1. Virtual Cop 2 does introduce a female character, a Janet, and Janet comes back in Virtual Cop 3, and she's a like a forensic investigator. And but the Virtual Cop 2 is like evil comes back because Joe Fang's not really dead or something, and then Virtual Cop 3, the there's a new evil group called the ECM that's out there. Pretty riveting stuff, but I don't think you play these type of games for the story at the end of the day. I think a basic story is pretty much all you need. I think that stems back to when we talked about these, like the different type of genres of games, and how some games you play for the gameplay and some games you play for the story. All of these type of rail shooters, you're playing for the gameplay. You're playing for the gratification of holding a plastic gun in your hand while you shoot at the screen.
Yeah, they also couldn't really have complex storylines. I mean, these are arcade games that you were probably playing for about an hour at the most. I mean, maybe if you wanted to load in a couple more quarters.
Unless you're really bad at the game.
Unless you're really bad at it. So they knew people's attention span wouldn't want them to really be focused on a storyline that was going on.
But that's how you get great storylines.
That's right.
Like for example, the storylines of Gunblade New York. But
yes,
we'll talk about Time Crisis first.
Yeah, Time Crisis was originally released on the Namco Super System 22 in 1995, and that's also an arcade. That's an arcade cabinet system. It was later ported to systems like the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2. And Time Crisis primarily used pistols that were referred to as gun cons, which is a portmanteau of gun and controller. Now, the gun cons that were featured in the arcade had this really cool feature, and this is how you knew people were playing either Virtua Cop or Time Crisis. If you walked by Virtua Cop, you wouldn't hear any noise besides the game. If you walked by Time Crisis, you would hear loud clicking sound because the guns had a blowback where whenever you shot, it would cock back.
Slide back. The slide would slide back.
So, as Seth noted, and as I remember, it was one of the ways you could tell the difference between the two games.
Apart from reading the name on the arcade,
right. But when you're a kid, you're not reading words. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, when the game was ported over to the PlayStation 2, it did come bundled with versions of these gun cons, but they did not feature this blowback feature. They actually took it out because of cost-saving methods. They realized just having kind of a block of plastic with the gun mechanism in it was cheaper than putting in the whole mechanical blowback feature. And
interestingly enough, even though they were both the arcade and the PlayStation were developed by Namco in-house, they did not work together, the teams. The PlayStation team and the arcade team didn't collaborate. So the PlayStation game actually had because the GPU of the PlayStation was not as fast as the Super System 22.
Right.
The game had its frames brought down to a slower level. There were limitations of the game so that only so many bad guys would be on the screen at the same time.
Yeah.
And they, in order to do lighting, they, individually did lighting, manually or something with, the different polygon. The way they did the lighting was not rendered by the system. It was instead built in. So I thought that was interesting that it just goes to show you that sometimes you don't collaborate and you actually get a subpar product comparatively to the arcade.
Now, unlike Virtua Cop, Time Crisis 1 was a solo arcade game, so it was only one player. In Time Crisis 2, they added multiplayer, but actually they did it through an interesting method. They didn't add a second controller. They actually added a whole second machine. They put two machines together and they linked them, and this allowed you to have a multiplayer feature. Time Crisis was also known for having a pedal that you could step on, and this would allow you to enter and exit cover. And if I remember playing Time Crisis correctly, I think the reloading was only available when you were in cover. So you actually had to duck into cover, then shoot, and then you could climb back up and you're reloaded.
Yes, and if you got shot while you were not in cover, you would lose hearts. But if you got shot while you were in cover, you would not lose hearts. Also, having two machines being linked together instead of having two controllers meant that two people who didn't know each each other could play Time Crisis by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a nice little feature that I think it had. It was something that they took into consideration when setting up the multiplayer. So the plot of Time Crisis is also fairly simple. It's centered around a character named Richard Miller, who is a quote-unquote one-man army, and he's dispatched by an agency called VSSE. Now, VSSE stands for the Vital Situation Swift Elimination International Intelligence Agency, which is a very long name.
Oh.
He's sent to save the daughter of a president of a country called Cercia. So the country goes through like a coup or something like that. The daughter gets kidnapped, and you're sent after her. And the future games followed very similar premises. Time Crisis saw 5 sequels as well as a few spin-offs. The spin-offs included Crisis Zone, Time Crisis Project Titan, and Time Crisis Raising Storm. And Time Crisis 5 came out in 2015 and utilized the Unreal Engine, which is very cool and something I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's some of these games, like, they're coming out in, like, arcade games coming out in 2015, 2018. There's some markets that arcades are still very popular. 2 of them offhand, the Japanese market, arcades are still very popular. Because of gambling laws. Zach, you can explain how that works?
Yeah, so from my understanding, and if anyone is more familiar with it, please send in a correction. But from my understanding, the gambling laws in Japan, at least up until recently, I think there might have been some changes, were very specific. So you could bet on things, but you couldn't win money. So you would go into these arcades and you would play all sorts of games, including games like Time Crisis, but you also had pachinko machines and other betting machines, and you can bet on things, and you would be rewarded with like a token or a gift of some form that you would actually take to a building next door or like across the street and exchange that for the monetary value of the item that you won, which was kind of a creative way to get around the law that pretty much stated you couldn't bet and win money. So you technically weren't betting and winning money. You were betting and winning something that was equivalent to money. But there are a lot of arcades in Japan that were actually created by major companies such as Sega, Nintendo, Konami. All of those kind of major companies had stock in this kind of arcade casino setup.
The other relatively new large market is the barcade premise, where people have been realizing that they can drink and play arcade games. There's no law preventing you from drinking and playing an arcade game at the same time. So
thank goodness.
and someone realized that. I feel like only like 5 years ago they realized that. So they've been opening up arcades and also serving liquor, and it's brilliant. And everybody who, especially Zach and my age, love it. And I've been to a few, to say the least.
Yeah, it is fun.
It's great. You can just tack in tokens when you buy drinks. Specifically, a large franchise is Dave & Buster's. And Dave & Buster's has the capital to be able to buy new versions of new games as they come out, versus maybe your local barcade, which may just have older stuff, which is fine as well. I mean, both are great. There's no such thing as, well, I can't say there's no such thing as bad video games, because XCOM Enforcer is a thing. So
yeah.
So in '95, a game called Gunblade New York, a favorite of Zachary and also myself. It was released on the Sega Model 2B. CRX arcade system, and it's an upright cabinet that has 2 large mounted machine gun shaped weapons that were pointed at the screen. You could pivot the machine gun, you can like swivel it around, but you couldn't take it from like the mount. It was like mounted into the cabinet itself. It's actually really tight. Because they have 2 of them, and they're pretty big. They're probably about a foot and change long, probably about 6 to 7 inches wide, and they're hefty.
Yes,
and they almost hit each other. That's how close they put them onto the cabinet. So there's a large screen, and then there's like a thin like a mount that comes out.
Yep.
And then the 2 guns are mounted on there, and there's like it's set in a way so that it's almost like an I-beam, where like it's wide. The arcade cabinet is wide to hold the guns, and then it kind of goes in so you can stand next to it. Mm-hmm. And then there's a foot pedal at the bottom that you can stand on. Well, it's not a pedal; it's like a platform you can stand on so that you can hold up to the gun. The the plot of Gunblade New York is that you are a person killing terrorists from New York. Coming out in 95, that was an okay thing to do.
That's right.
And you fly in a helicopter, that's why it's a blade. So you have helicopter blades, and you have a gun on the helicopter. It's not like you have some weird gun, also blade.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
The blades of the helicopter and a gun. And you're in New York, hence Gunblade New York.
It's literally gun, blade, New York. I will say, now, when we're doing some research for this game, I tried to find anything else about the plot. It was literally a sentence on everything that I went that was all the same. Saving New York from terrorists. It never actually says who you are.
Right.
I assume you're police or some form of military. You might as well just be a guy on a helicopter with a heavy machine gun.
Perhaps you are the terrorist.
Yeah, who knows?
So you do play as either... So I watched somebody play the game on YouTube, because you can watch people play old arcade games on YouTube. You either play as a dude who is dressed in red or a dude who is dressed in blue. I'm guessing, depending on which side you're on... And it's probably right red, blue left is probably how it works.
That's like a political statement right there.
Yeah, well, no,
right, red.
I mean, physically right. Yeah, and that's how the parties came to be.
Yeah, Gunblade New York is a two-party system.
Gunblade
That's what
New
Hamilton's
York.
About. It's about Gunblade New York.
It's about Gunblade New York. Everything in life stems back to Gunblade New York. So anyway, do you want to bring us into the last game that is probably one of the best?
Yeah. So House of the Dead, coming out in 1996. It was released on the Sega Model 2 arcade system, and it was ported to the Sega Saturn in 1998 and Windows also in 1998. The game was very similar to games like Time Crisis and Virtua Cop, but instead of shooting terrorists, this time you're shooting zombies. Pretty cool. So House of the Dead had two pistols, one red, one blue, for the corresponding 1-2 players. And later games, such as House of the Dead 3, introduced a shotgun controller that you had to pump to reload, and 4 had submachine gun shaped controllers. The story followed Special Agent Thomas Rogan, who receives a distress call from the fiancé of a renowned biochemist and geneticist named Roy Curian, and Rogan and his partner G travel to Europe only to find it's a good name. They travel to Europe only to find that the town they arrive in is now overrun with the army of the undead, which includes zombies and also like flying monsters and weird like snake-like creatures and stuff. So again, a very unique game because it took this whole genre that really was very crime and like terrorist killing centric. Like, all the previous games in this genre were focused on fighting humans, really, or bad guys, and now you're fighting monsters, you're fighting zombies.
Is Thomas Rogan American?
Yes, I believe he is.
So the story is that these two guys who are American get a call from a European biochemist, and then they go there, and the town that they go to is overrun with the undead, and their response is shoot it with pistols?
Yes.
Great. It's what America's for, killing zombies.
House of the Dead is also great because it's one of those games that, like Resident Evil and some of those older survival horror games, when the English dialogue is terrible, and they did not focus on... They translated it, but they definitely did not localize it. And so for the difference, for those who don't know, translation is simply taking something from one language and putting it into another language. Localizing is doing that, but also making that thing have context that would make sense for people in the other country to understand the item being spoken. So if something's not localized, a lot of times you have dialogue that is bad or broken in terms of context. So one of my favorite moments, though, is at the beginning of the third chapter. At one point, you are looking at a item that is labeled security card, and your character says, "This must be a security card." At another part, when you're being, when you're going through a front door to this mansion that you're supposed to be going to, one of the characters will say, "Hey, let's go in," and the other character says, "Sure, why not?" It's the point of the mission is to go into the mansion. And the guy's like, "Yeah, well, So House of the Dead 2 has some even worse dialogue, specifically in the sense that they got a voice actor who sounds a lot like Kermit the Frog when he's talking. So it's just hilarious. There are multiple sequels to the game, 5 sequels. The last was House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn, which came out in 2018 and saw release through Seth's favorite place, Dave & Buster's. And it also saw many spin-offs, including the popular Typing of the Dead. Typing of the Dead is a remake of the second game, House of the Dead 2, and it's a typing tutor, which sounds like a weird combination, having a gun game, this, light gun game, be translated over as a typing tutor, but it works out. So what you're doing is you're typing words, and as you type the words, each letter acts as a bullet, and when you finish typing the word, it kills the monster that you just typed to death.
It also came out in arcades.
It did, yeah. So Typing of the Dead came out in arcades, and it had a modified cabinet that featured 2 keyboards, like QWERTY style keyboards. They look like Model M, like white IBM style keyboards that were just mounted to the arcade cabinet. It also came out in the Dreamcast, and what's another fun thing, I love Typing of the Dead. Another fun thing about Typing of the Dead is, while it is pretty much a direct remake of the second game, they do modify some of the graphics. Specifically, your character doesn't walk around holding a gun. He walks around with a keyboard that is like propped up, and it's attached to a Dreamcast that he's wearing on his back like a backpack. House of the Dead was also adapted into a movie in 2003. It was directed by Uwe Boll, who was a very interesting movie director. He has done a lot of movies based on video games, such as Far Cry and Postal. It's a very bad movie. I told Seth that one of the topics that I want to cover at some point are movie games. So movies that were based on video games, such as like Super Mario Brothers or Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or Resident Evil. And during that, I will give you my spiel about Uwe Boll. He is a bizarre director who has made a lot of very bad movies.
Finally, there is a game that we just want to mention because we're talking about rail shooters, and it's not an arcade game, but it's a game called Pokemon Snap.
Yeah.
It came out in 1999 and was released on the N64, one of the greatest consoles ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it utilizes on-rails. It's an on-rails shooter, though, except instead of shooting the Pokemon, which in my opinion would have been hilarious, you take pictures of them, and your idea is to create it's a camera simulator. So you go through and you play as the uniquely named Todd Snap, and who is a Pokemon photographer, is asked by Professor Oak to take pictures of Pokemon. And you travel through different locations, and you have to you have to go through the same zone like multiple times, because you unlock like different things like apples and pester balls, and be able to, so you can like hit Pokemon with things to get them to do different poses, because the more unique the pose is, the more points you get, and you need to get multiple points, and you can't take the same pose twice, and so on and so forth. So you have to find unique Pokemon, and they may be hiding until you throw something at them. It was originally designed as a Nintendo 64 DD, which is an ill-fated peripheral for the 64, only to be released in Japan, called Jack and the Beanstalk. And the game was the Jack and the Beanstalk game was probably not what Pokemon Snap came out. But once they got the Pokemon IP, they redid the game, made it Pokemon Snap, released it, and it was a success. Because Pokemon is a very successful.
It's a moneymaker, that's for sure. The N64 DD, for those who don't know, is it's a disk drive add-on for the N64, and it released in Japan, and it bombed in Japan. So there were plans to bring it over to America, but by the time those plans were starting to become into fruition, they realized that they weren't making any money from it, so there's no point in bringing it to America. A lot of games that were originally designed for the 64 DD ended up being brought over to the standard N64, such as Pokemon Snap and games like Majora's Mask. Just, interesting little thing. Also, Jack and the Beanstalk might have been like an RPG game. It might have been completely different than Pokemon Snap, but that is its base. That's what it started out as.
So yeah, so that's our arcade light gun rail shooters, 3D rail shooters, as it were. Really, is what we spoke primarily about. So. Zach, what are you excited about buying, waiting, or passing on?
My buy, wait, pass is going to be Serious Sam 4. It's a game being developed by Crow Team and published by our favorite publisher for Seth and me, Devolver Digital. We talk about them a lot, especially during our PAX episode. So Serious Sam 4, quote-unquote, reignites the classic first-person series in a high-powered prequel loaded with an explosive arsenal, intergalactic carnage, and perfectly timed one-liners. Personally, I think it's going to be a pass for me. I have Serious Sam 3, and I have a couple of the early games in the franchise. They just never really struck a chord with me the same way that other early first-person shooters have. Serious Sam 3 came out a few years ago, and it just didn't really hit home for me, the style of first-person shooter that I traditionally like. I feel like it's almost the kind of first-person shooter that's designed for me, but because of that, it just doesn't work. It's bombastic, it's explosive, it's high octane, and I love all those things. That's one of the reasons I love Doom and Duke Nukem. But it's almost like they made the perfect game for me, but it just is missing something, that je ne sais quoi that makes me not like it. So I'm not a huge fan of the franchise, so I'm probably going to pass on it. But if you're a huge Serious Sam fan, be on the lookout for Serious Sam 4. Personally, I think it looks great. It looks like a really nice game in terms of graphics, and I'm sure it's going to be a fun game. And who knows if it gets great reviews, maybe I'll give it a second chance. Yeah. But
and it's being published by Devolver. We love
Devolver. We do love Devolver, and I usually don't like to turn down a Devolver game, but currently a pass.
So my current buy, wait, pass is a game called Empire of Sin. So it's the time of the podcast where Seth is excited about a strategy game that's
Desperados.
Desperados. It's like a third-person strategy game. This one, Empire of Sin, is set as in the 1920s and puts you at the heart of a ruthless criminal underworld. Being developed by Romero Games and being published by Paradox Interactive. Romero Games is led by John Romero, who is of Doom.
Yep, and Brenda Romero, who's his wife.
And Brenda Romero, who's his wife.
And
the Romeros.
She worked on games like Wizardry, I believe.
Which is also a great game. We should talk about Wizardry.
Yeah.
And so it is a third-person strategy game where you control mobsters and you have to become the best mobster around, which you can only become the best mobster by killing other mobsters.
The way it's got to be done.
It's how it's done. It's coming out in fall of 2020, so I'm very excited. I've been looking out for this game for a long time, and I'm excited for it to release, and it will be a buy for me.
Awesome.
I like buying games.
Yeah.
I don't pass on a lot of games.
You don't pass on a lot. I feel like I pass on more games than you do.
Yeah. I buy games, but it's the objective is trying to get me to play them. That's the
trick.
Real
That's
thing.
the trick.
That's the trick.
Maybe I'm just a negative Nelly.
There's a lot of ways that you can contact us, support us, or listen to us. You can contact us by sending us an email to classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. You could also go to our website and fill out the contact form where it goes right to our email. In fact, now you can even send an email to classicgamingbrothers@classicgamingbrothers.com, and that'll go to an email. You can even send secret emails to Seth@classicgamingbrothers.com or Zach@classicgamingbrothers.com, and they will go to the corresponding brother in case you want to send secret fan mail.
No, they're just going to go to the same inbox.
Everything just dumps into the same mailbox. Yeah. So that's a couple ways that you can contact us. You can also hit us up on our social media. We have a Facebook at Classic Gaming Brothers, an Instagram at Classic Gaming Brothers, and a Twitter at CG Brothers Pod, where we announce on both Facebook and Twitter when episodes drop, and you may even see when episodes drops on Instagram. And that's I don't know, it's just where things go. We also you can support us by going over to Twitch and watching us on Twitch. We are twitch.tv/Classic Gaming Brothers. Also, Zachary has a VS Classic Gaming Brothers, which is his view, where we play games. They're funny. We have no schedule, so we're really bad at the Twitch. But if you want, you can give us a follow, and if you see us live, you can watch us. You can also head over to YouTube if you want to watch some of our older Twitch videos or listen to our podcasts on YouTube. It's at Classic Gaming Brothers for our YouTube. So you can support us by liking all of our stuff, sharing all of our stuff, telling 3 friends, only 3 friends, no more, no less, because if you like something, you generally tell 3 people. If you dislike something, you tell much more. So tell 3 people, and that's how it works. Then we know that you like us. So tell 3 friends. You can also go to the website and you can buy a t-shirt or a mug if you're listening to this during the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's a thing that says on our website that we are delayed in shipping. We're about 25 to 30 days behind. So we will take your money and then we will ship you a product eventually. You never have to buy anything from us. We just like it if you listen to us and tell people that you like the podcast if somebody's looking for if they have a desperate need to hear 2 brothers talk about video games.
Who knows? Some people just have that need.
That need. And finally, you can listen to us on where any podcasts are played. So you can, any podcasting app, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Acast, even directly on Podbeam, our website. You can even listen to us at our website, ClassicGamingBrothers.com. And so you can listen to us there, follow, like, subscribe, do all those things, engage. It's great. It helps us when we help you by making more podcasts. And so there's that. So Zach, is there anything else that you would like to say?
I don't know. I'm thinking of something. You know what? I got it. Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Zach.
And I've been Seth.
And we have been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. Do we have like theme songs from like, I don't know, like Virtual Cop or Gunblade New York?
Gunblade New York. I'll get the music from Gunblade New York.
Gunblade New York right now. What do you think the theme song sounds like? Gunblade New York.
That's it right there.
that's it.
It's a very rare moment where Seth sings something.
I know, only for Gunblade New York.